The computer likes me. Good morning. Welcome. I hope you had a good night. I see several people today who weren't here yesterday, so we'll do a bit of recapitulation. Also, please be comfortable, be loose, do whatever's easy. If you need to get up and walk around or stretch or go to the bathroom anytime, if you get a snack, feel free to. This is not one of those, you have to be locked in a room for 8 hours and you can't use the bathroom kind of things. This is more relax and enjoy yourself kind of a thing. And if you don't mute your phone, then we can all enjoy your taste in cell phone ringtones. Or not, I mean, it's all good. So yeah, be comfortable. Especially, feel free to use the bathroom anytime you need to, and that way we won't have huge lines when we take a break. So, to the business at hand. I will recapitulate briefly what I talked about yesterday, what we talked about. Yes, you're online. I will recapitulate briefly with a bit of a parable, or maybe it's a metaphor or a simile. Someone will need to explain to me the difference between those ones. So it's basically like this. You're in a dark room, very dark room. Can't see anything. There's a TV on. And the room is really, really dark. You can't see anything but the TV and sort of darkness around it. And you're very, very comfortable. You're so comfortable you can't even really feel your body. You're just there. You're just floating there with no distractions whatsoever. And the TV's on. And it's a really high quality TV. It's just incredible definition TV. It's HD to the power of HD TV. It's a very high-tech TV. It not only presents sound and light images, but it also presents senses of touch and senses of smell and taste. And you're sitting there, there's nothing else to do but watch the TV, so you get sucked in, of course, and you sort of forget that you're in the room and everything, as the TV will do, and you just get sucked into the TV and you're watching the show. And in the show, there seems to be a body which seems to be you walking around, and you can kind of seem to control it somewhat. And there seem to be other bodies, there seem to be other beings like yourself in the show, and they're all interacting, and all the beings in the show are saying, "Hey, you're really here. This is real. We're interacting. What we're doing here is very important. You know, look at this intense situation we're all involved in. You know, it's really absorbing, and there's a lot to worry about, and you have to really struggle to achieve things and avoid things and make friends and avoid enemies and all this kind of thing. So you're basically lost in this TV show, and the channel randomly changes from time to time. The program you're watching, the regular program, goes off the air, and all of a sudden you're watching some sort of vague, dark, snowy thing that's on for a while, and so you sort of just sit there and you space out like this. And then all of a sudden another program will come on, you know, and just some random weird sci-fi thing or something. Who knows what sci-fi? Like some crazy person has the clicker and they're switching the channels at random. And you're watching a horror movie, or you're watching a sci-fi show, or you're watching some weird abstract thing, and then that gets turned off, and then there's no program for a little while more, but this crazy snow and little background and who knows what, and then all of a sudden the usual program that you're so absorbed in comes back on, and you're watching that for a while. And this sort of goes on and on and on and on. And after a while, you're just lost completely in the show. You're lost completely in the program. And you don't know that it's a TV show. You don't know that it's a TV. You think everything that's happening in the show, all the imagery you're being fed, all the virtual situations you seem to be presented with is actually happening, or you're very absorbed in them and you're really playing the game and you're fighting a good fight and you're participating in everything. And this is very much like what your situation is right now. Of course, this is just a metaphor or whatever it is, and so it's not 100% accurate. but it conveys very nicely the degree to which people typically, consensus reality mindset, is completely absorbed in one's interpretation of what's going on and relative importances based on that interpretation, ignoring entirely the medium of its presentation. So here we are, right? Here you are. You're in this world. You're in this talk. There's seems to be other people around. There's this weird guy up front talking, waving his arms around. Whatever. You're in this bizarre room with all this lights and stuff, and you think of it as being a certain thing. But how is this appearing? How's the light appearing? How is the sound appearing? How is it being perceived? What's the mechanics of this presentation? What's the substance of this presentation? What's the medium of this presentation? In our TV analogy, when you're lost in a TV show, you're lost in the characters, you're lost in the plot, you're lost in the change of situations, and you ignore the fact that it's little flashes of light on a flat screen. Right? When you're lost in a movie, you're Indiana Jones or some romantic chick flick or whatever, and you're like, oh, this is great, all this, amazing eventfulness. And all it is patterns of light flickering on a screen. And you don't pay attention to that, do you? I mean, that's all that's actually present, but you're not interested. That's boring. Who gives a shit about that? Wow, tell me the story. Give me the juicy stuff. Give me the exciting stuff. Give me the sound and fury signifying nothing. And this is very much what we do now in normal experience. Where the medium is just a given. The experience is happening and it's something maybe, I don't know what, but what's going on? What's happening here? What's the exciting stuff? Where's the punchline? Where's the soap opera? But we make an error in judgment because we assume that the medium doesn't matter, that it's just a constant in the equation, that it's just transparent, that it's just plain vanilla, and that the program is what's interesting, all the action and all the interaction of all the apparent characters and all that is what's important. And we think the medium is just here, it's not interesting, it's not important, it has there's nothing for me there, it's just boring. Like you're gonna sit and watch TV for an hour just watching little flickers of light and ignore the storyline that's supposedly happening, right? I mean, try that sometime. It's not easy because, right, it's boring. Your awareness gets seduced by the apparent, information content of all these shifting patterns, and you sort of go there and you give them virtual reality and pretend that that's actually happening and get all involved in the implications of that. And who gives a shit about sure, it's flickering flashes of light, but you're going to sit there and stare at little flickering flashes of light all night. You're going to watch the show. Even though in actual fact, all you're doing is staring at little flickering flashes of light. And we do exactly the same thing here in experience. We assume that the medium is a constant, is irrelevant. It's just transparent. It's okay, yeah, sure, experience is here and maybe it's something. But so what? It's showing me my life. It's showing me the real stuff. But in actuality, that is a mistaken conclusion, because it turns out that the nature of the medium is not just nothing. The nature of the medium is extremely powerful, extremely pregnant with implication, meaningfulness, and profundity, far exceeding the content of the shows. But we don't even know that because we haven't ever bothered to investigate it, because we said, oh, okay, the experience is here. Yeah, so what? Okay, so where's the action? We just skip right over that because it seems to be kind of transparent and not very interesting, and go right to the plot line, right? This is very common. We're all very familiar with this. This is normal human consensus reality experience. But it turns out that what experience actually is, the medium, the way that this is appearing, the, let's say, loosely speaking, mechanism by which this is showing up, has profound potency and profound implication for intelligence that takes the time to give it a little attention, to give it a little exploration. Oh, thanks so much.
There's 7 in here now, 2 extras.
And of course, we spoke about this. We touched on this yesterday from a bunch of different angles and with a bunch of different degrees of depth and so on and so forth. The biggest implication of ignoring the medium and going right to the apparent plot line is a global misunderstanding of what's actually happening. Typically in contentious reality thinking, we assume that we're this character. You are this body. You are in this situation of your life. You are involved with and more or less stuck with your circumstances and grappling with them and trying to manipulate them or dodge them or ignore them or whatever strategies you employ and so on, as in this interactive, virtual game of your life. So, and typically we define ourselves as that. That's what I am. I am Peter Brown. I am 64 years old. I was born in 1950. I this, I that, I the other. And that's it. That's the story. That's the truth. That's what it really is. And which has a certain implication. It's like, well, okay, I'm 64 years old and I'm going to die soon. Okay. Maybe not real soon. Maybe real soon. Right? It's like, okay, wow, what's up with that? What's that about? So all of this that's important, that's been so important for 64 years, is all of a sudden going to stop. Well, then what? Well, I don't want to think about that because this is because all my eggs are in this basket, but I'm not going to think about the basket being taken away or disappearing. That's like, whoa, I don't want to go there. That's too weird. For one thing. And then there's the feeling of powerlessness, the feeling of being stuck in my circumstances. Well, I'm Peter Brown and I'm 64 and a male in America. Well, gee, I'd rather be a 18-year-old female in 20,200, in Sweden, or what? I can't do that because I'm stuck in these circumstances. I'm hammered. I'm nailed to, what can loosely be called my karma. I'm nailed to, embedded in this chain of circumstances, and seeming to try and manipulate it or get my way out of it is like trying to swim in molasses. It's like, well, we all have a certain degree of skillfulness, and we all have a certain range of options in terms of manipulating it. But the range is pretty small relative to if you were dreaming or something, and all of a sudden you could just bang, I'm flying, and I'm female, and I'm this, and I'm that, and that was like, that doesn't seem to happen in this situation, does it? I'm still 64 and this and embedded in all of this complexity and so on. So there's a kind of a implication of stuckness, an implication of impediment or some kind of limitation, apparent limitation that seems to be present in terms of that interpretation.
I'll keep an eye out for where they come. There's nobody front. We shouldn't need that.
Yeah. And it turns out that is actually patently not true. In terms of our analogy, I'm whatever being it is that's in the dark room watching all this on TV. This is just a show. This is just a program that happens to be on, And I think that it's real because there's not much alternative. The alternative is like basically a completely dark room that I can't be aware of much in at all. So I'm just lost. I'm just basically totally brainwashed. The show is reality. Reality is the show, period, comprehensively. And that's not true. It happens that is not true. It's not actually like that. It's not actually the case. What is doing this, let's say, what is seeing this by analogy, let's go back to our TV analogy. Suppose the TV is a hyper-intelligent AI computer that's actually generating the programs at the same time as it's displaying them. All right. So it's not like it's beaming some program that was made in some studio somewhere. It's just like spitting this stuff out in real time. So here's this show, right? The show is called, Sunday in March, Peter Brown, Weekend Satsang in San Rafael. And, here's the cast of thousands and blah, blah, blah. So that's all going on, right? But it's just, how is it appearing? How is it here? This medium that is putting all this here with such incredible detail and such incredible density of information and content. What is it really? Is it really just a neutrality? Is it really just a wash in the equation? Or is it actually the player? Is it actually what's doing all this? Is it actually intelligent? Is it actually, a player in this game? It's a hidden character that is doing all this, but is invisible, so you can't see it doing the doing. It's just all you see is the result of it, and you assume it's just a given. It's just here. All this light, you all are just here. This light is just here. This sound is just here. All the implication is just here as a given, and like, so what? So, which of course, we're all very familiar with that mode of approaching it. But the medium of what's doing it is not only what's actually doing all this, it's the real protagonist. It's both your real ally and your real nemesis, right? All this seemingly projected allies and nemesis that show up in your circumstances aren't really there. They're just being projected by this AI that's actually doing it. That's the real entity behind it all. And not only that, but weirdly enough, what's watching it is that same AI. So this AI is projecting all of this imagery and is watching all of this imagery. And it gets lost in all the imagery as if that's the whole show. And in actuality, none of that is actually that way, because it's just an AI in a dark room. It's not really a world with people and beings in space and time and interaction and cause and effect. It just plays that on TV. It's just projecting it as if that was the case. That's a very different implication, isn't it? I mean, that's a very different scenario. You lost in the vicissitudes of your life, or some transcendental intelligence that's entangled from circumstances that for Baroque, obscure reasons and mechanism is projecting for itself all of this display. I mean, there's a very different implication. There's a very different feeling tone to those two scenarios. And the one sounds like sci-fi, right? The one, well, which one? So anyway, this is kind of the conundrum. This is kind of the koan that we presented yesterday, another term in various ways. And of course, you can't get the implications of seeing what this really is until you see what it really is. In other words, you have to see it to get the implications of what's involved, to get the payoff. You can entertain the idea, well, gee, that would be interesting if that's true. Let me look into it and see if that's true. But you can't really project what it would be like to actually see that, to actually know that you were not, you're the human being lost in your life, but you were some transcendental, inconceivable intelligence that is somehow both doing and watching all this, in a vastly, utterly different context, in the context of being a person in history, in your life stream. But it turns out that this experiment is approachable in practicality. It's empirically approachable because the medium that this is presented in is obvious. It leaves clues to what it is. It's not actually seamless. It's not actually perfectly transparent. It's like if a TV, you can have a really good HD TV, but if you look close enough, you see the pixels. You see the little flashes of color, and you get, wow, there's not really people talking to each other. It's just a little, little flashes of color on a screen, little dots that are pulsing, right? You can see that if you look close. Of course, we don't usually bother to look close because we're lost in the show. But the same thing happens here, perhaps not so surprisingly, but strangely enough, from the point of view of the human being that's lost in the program, right? If you look very closely at experience itself as the fact of experience, the medium of experience, the substance of experiencing, you discover that it has a quality itself that is irrespective of the qualities of the apparent content of the soap opera, of the show. In the same sense that the little flashes of light on the TV are irrespective of the plot line of what the people are doing in the show, right? They're just sort of two different dimensions. They don't have anything to do with each other. The one presents the other, but the other is what seems to be happening there is entirely different than what's actually happening, the flashes of light on the screen. And the same thing happens here. If you look very closely at experience, and we played with this a little bit from a few different points of view yesterday, you can discover the texture of experience. You can basically see the pixels in terms of that analogy. You can discover the texture of consciousness, the texture of all this energy, the media that shows up, that makes up the content, different of the more advanced spiritual traditions have evolved all sorts of techniques for this and tricks for this. But you don't even really need the tricks. You just need to plant the seed of exploring as a possibility. If experiencing is something in itself, what is it? And so instead of looking at what's on the show and the TV, you start looking at the screen. So what's the screen look like? How's it work? Well, it's not literally a flat screen, perhaps, but you don't know what it is, so you can have an open mind and just begin to look. So what is the analogy, the equivalent of the screen that this is on? What is the equivalent of the flashes of light that is being presented? What is the equivalent of all that? And lo and behold, you actually can find that. You actually discover that experiencing itself has a texture, and all of the apparent circumstances and events and qualities that are experienced are made of this same textural substance. In the same sense that in the TV screen, all of the people and scenes and the animate beings and the sets that they're in a program, a TV show, are all made of the same little flashes of light on the screen. The substance is essentially the same. The substance doesn't know whether it's portraying a person's face or a picture on a wall behind the person, because it's of an entirely different order. And the same thing is happening here. When you look at your finger and you look at an inanimate object, the light you're seeing is the same thing. The light doesn't know, oh, this is sentient, this is me, that's insentient, it's not me. It's not like that at all. It's the same medium. And by analogy, I'm not going to, right at this moment, I'm not going to go into great depth with all of this, but by analogy, if you look at any and all experience on any and all qualities of density or texture or what have you, sound, light, thought, vision, hearing, thought, sensation, whatever, you discover that ultimately it's all made of the same thing. It all presents in the same way. And the way that it presents is very interesting. We touched on this yesterday a little bit. It's unresolvable. In the same way that, suppose you're watching Seinfeld on TV. I'm dating myself. I don't know current TV show. Suppose you're watching Seinfeld on TV. You know what Seinfeld looks like, right? But what does he really look like? So you look closer. But you start to look closer, and eventually you just see little flashes of light. So you can't tell what Seinfeld looks like because it doesn't resolve into Seinfeld. It resolves into flashes of light. Well, lo and behold, we find the same thing here. Try looking at your own face in the mirror sometime, and just for 10 minutes do it. And those of you that are old hippies, I'm sure you've done this. And those of you that are space cadets, I'm sure you've done this. But anyway, try looking at yourself in the mirror for 10 minutes or even 20 minutes. Just with the idea of what does my face really look like? And you'll discover a very curious phenomenon. The longer you look, it's not like it converges more and more sharply and more precisely into a particular way it is. On the contrary, it does exactly the opposite. It opens up and it begins morphing and it begins changing. And you end up knowing less about what you look like after 10 minutes than you did when you started. And the same thing is true of all experience, sensory experience and mental experience, which is, I mean, we classify typically mental experience as not sensory. Humans have all these classifications, which, no surprise, turn out to be completely inaccurate. All experience is the same. All experience is made of the same stuff. All experience happens in the same way. All experience, let's say, is created from the same source and in the same manner, and all experience is perceived from the same point of view and by the same mechanism. And all this is very loosely speaking by analogy, because it's not actually like that literally. It's not like there's a machine somewhere doing all this in a literal sense. So there's one very simple thing going on here that looks like all this complexity. All these different sense fields and thought and subjective and objective and self and other, and all this complexity is actually being generated and consists of, and substantially consists of, one event, one kind of functioning, one thing that's being what it is, doing what it does, which happens to look like all this. Very much like our TV. The TV is getting a little ratty from being used as an inadequate analogy, so we need to update it, get a more modern model. Now that's a very different implication from, oh, here's me, Peter Brown, this little, limited, neurotic, semi-skilled human being, flailing around in my life in the midst of all these vast circumstances, most of which I don't understand, and I'm doing my best to struggle in them, versus an amazing, call it a multimedia presentation of one thing that is being what it is, for unknown. Why is it like that? Well, who knows, right? But it is discoverable that it is like that, and wow, the implications of that are very different. If this is all basically me, this is all what I am. I'm not Peter Brown, this human being that's showing up in this show. I am some actuality that is perceiving this and is creating this and is actually the substance for this multimedia presentation. Well, that's a pretty different implication, isn't it? I mean, that paints a very different picture than, little Peter Brown flailing around, not particularly skillfully in his life. And yet they're just two different ways of describing the same situation, the same circumstance. But the implication is drastically different. One of these scenarios, what human beings call enlightenment or realization or liberation, simply because when you see that this is not in this story, this is doing this story, and because of what this is, and you are that, you discover that you're liberated from being stuck in cause and effect. You're liberated from being stuck in limitation, even though there's apparent limitation and apparent cause and effect appearing in the display, in the apparition, in the field of apparition. You aren't actually in that. You are what that's made of, and you are what's doing that, and you are what's seeing that. A very different scenario, very different implication from that point of view than poor me stuck in my crappy life, flailing around, doing a half-assed job of trying to get through it, and pretty soon I'm gonna, life sucks and then you die. Kind of a whole different feeling tone there, isn't it? So that's kind of a, that's using one, that's heavy-handedly inadequately using one sort of an analogy to illustrate what our options are here. You can just sort of gullibly go along with what you've been sold, what you've been told. What do you mean you're God? You're not God. You're just a human being. I knew you since you were a kid. I know where you were born. I've seen the house you grew up in. This, that. Blah blah blah. So there's that option, and we're all very familiar with that option. We've all been down that road and hung out there, for however long. And then this other option of, wow, what is this? And in terms of what is this, what does that say about what am I? And it's a vastly different implication. It's a vastly different scenario in those two forks of the road, those two options of being with this. So then the question becomes, okay, that's a nice story. Cool, that's really fascinating. Nice sci-fi story, right? Put up or shut up. How do you tell? How do you investigate? If that was true, how can I find out if it's true? And as I said, it turns out that this medium here, the medium of your experience, the medium of the presentation of your current circumstances of your life and your being and your embodiment and so on and so forth, is actually not perfectly transparent. It has grain. It has a grain of the medium. It has a texture of the medium in the same way that the TV has a little flashing dots of light. And so even though if you don't look very closely, it looks like a bunch of people sitting in a room, so on and so forth, when you begin to look more closely, you can see the little flashes of light. Literally, you can see little flashes of light. So what do you do? Look closer. It's that simple. Look closer. Your experience is always happening, so the opportunity to investigate it is always present. Of course, we're usually swept away and caught up in the soap opera, so we don't have the wherewithal or attention to bother to look because we're too busy, fighting the good fight. But from time to time, it may happen that your head is out above water and you're relaxing and you're chilling out and you're not really in the thick of it too much. And you might just look around and, this is pretty interesting here. It's a pretty strange phenomena going on here, this thing, this experience, this perception. What is it that's seeing this? What is it that's being seen? What's it made of? What texture does it have? What degree of pixelation does it have? Obviously not literally in those terms, but these are kind of jumping off points to looking at experiencing rather than being lost in our usual interpretations of experience, being lost in the soap opera that we're creating by interpreting our life as here I am in this world in these circumstances and blah, blah, blah. What am I going to do about that? So that's a very brief, inaccurate recapitulation of yesterday for those of you that weren't here. Yeah, why didn't I just say that? Why did we have to sit here all fucking day? Places to go, things to do, people to be. But just a second. I'm going to babble on a little bit more, and then we can have a little chat. There's a lot of aspects of this situation that are very peculiar. It has a flavor of being extremely participatory, doesn't it? It's not a simple presentation like in a TV screen where the viewer is passive and the activity is active, and so you're just watching the show. It's a very high degree of apparent interactivity. You can't really tell what's going on with that, but it feels like that, doesn't it? It feels like you're actually participating. You're not just being passively watching something transpiring that's wholly outside of you. There's this intense kind of a participatory flavor to it. And that's very interesting. There's the way there's the mechanism of focus of attention, the way focus of attention dances around spontaneously and continuously. That's very interesting. There's there's the vast range of textures that the medium of experiencing seems to show up in. Sensory, vision, the perception of light seems to be very different than the perception of thought. Seems to be very different than the perception of sound, and the perception of touch, and so on and so forth. That's very interesting. And when you look at the details of the actual mechanism of this, the dynamism of this, you discover all sorts of aspects of the way it seems to be that are very interesting. And all of these apparent modes that it seems to present in are fruitful areas of investigation, good things to look at and say, wow, that's interesting. What's up with that? What's really going on there? So this sense of participation is very interesting. So how does that really work? It seems like I can move my hand. It seems like I'm doing that, right? But if I look very closely at all this, again, it gets very strange and very subtle, because when I move my hand, where does the impetus to move the hand come from? Where does the desire or the motivation come from? And so on and so forth. And so the simple notion of, oh, I'm doing it because I decided to do it, turns out to be just an assertion. And if you look very closely at what actually happens, it begins to get a little more mysterious. Why do I choose to do the things I choose to do? Why am I saying these precise words that I'm saying at this moment instead of some other words? Why did I decide to do that instead of decide to do that? What's the mechanism? What's happening there? What's doing that? Where's that coming from? Is it really some me that's sitting there looking over it all? I think the next word I say will be the. Is it really like that, or is it not? Is it different than that? And so likewise, this sense of participation turns out, like all interpretations, to be an oversimplification of something that is much more slippery and subtle and strange. Overall, as we talked about yesterday at great length, overall, a real key to seeing through this, the veracity of all this apparent, projection of event, is in the unresolvability, the slipperiness of what it actually is in real time. In other words, if you look at anything in your experience that you're used to thinking of it is this, it is that, it is this way, it is that way. When you look very closely at what's actually happening, you discover, well, I was oversimplifying that. It's not really like that. It's weirder than that. It's stranger than that. It's slipperier than that. And the closer you look, again, like trying to figure out what your face looks like in the mirror, the less certain you are about what's really happening, because it turns out to be it's very strange and multidimensional. It doesn't come together into some kind of a clear simplicity of, oh, it's this way. Of course, I thought it was that way, and I looked, so I found it very precisely being that. It's exactly the opposite. It turns out you can be more and more certain that things are a certain way if you don't look very closely. As soon as you begin to look more closer at any phenomena whatsoever, you discover, wow, it's more complex, it's more subtle, it's more multidimensional than I had been holding it to be. And you look closer than that, and you find even more so. And you look closer than that, and you find even more so. And in actuality, anyone who is an experienced yogi, an experienced investigator of all of this, will tell you that the very strange fact is, the closer you look for things, the less you find. It's all smoke and mirrors. I'm sure many of you have heard the myth of Maya. That in Advaita, there's this Maya, this projection of this as being actual, that in actuality is essentially nothing at all. Well, it's not exactly nothing in any simple sense. It's not a simple zero, or else why would it seem to be so solidly and convincingly like this? But nonetheless, you can find, if you pursue it, that if you look very, very closely at this, anything you look at essentially disappears. It doesn't disappear into a simple nothing, but it so utterly and vastly transcends your starting point of investigation as to be essentially as if it was nothing. So you go looking for light, and what you find, of course you don't ever get to the bottom of looking for light, but after a long, long, long investigation of penetrating into it more and more subtly, you know much less at the end of your search than you did at your start. But as you move into anything, it becomes more and more of a question mark. So this is a very interesting property that it's very simple to find. This is experiential. This is not philosophy or theoretical or a heady argument. This is just like look for yourself at your own damn experience substantially, and you will notice this bizarre phenomenon. That things are more solid when you don't look at them, and the more you look at them, the less solid, the less certain they become. And of course, I'm using the language look as if it was visual, but of course, in any dimension of experiencing, you discover exactly the same principle. You look at thought, and thought seems to be, I know what thought is. I'm thinking all the time, right? We're all very familiar with thought. But you go looking at, well, what is thought actually? What is it that's there? What is that's happening when thought is appearing? And you look at that, and it's pretty darn weird. And you look closer, and it's even weirder. And you look closer than that, and it's even weirder. And you sort of end up in just weird, the power of weird. And where did the thought go? I started out looking for thought, and I don't know where I am. Where do you end up? So this is one apparent principle of the nature of this actuality that is a really obvious access point to investigation, to inquiry. And there are many others. In the instantaneity, the fact that experience only happens in the instant, and the instant has zero duration. I mean, that's pretty weird. If you think, normal thinking is, well, this is here. It's here. It's here for a while. It's always now, and now kind of lasts a while. It's pretty, it's pretty solid. But if you look really, the sense is, the past sort of becomes now, and it hangs out being now for a while, and then it kind of disappears and becomes the future. But if you look very closely at time, you discover something very strange. It's always now, but you can't find now. Like how short is now? Well, it's shorter than that. Shorter than that. And again, you look and again, it's not that it literally becomes shorter than you think it is, but you discover, wow, what's going on here has nothing to do with duration. It has nothing to do with how long it lasts or how short it lasts. It's not even like that. That category is just not even relevant. It's weirder than that. Same thing, so that's time. Same thing applies to space. And we have a very simple idea of space. This is close, that's far. The closer it's bigger, farther is smaller, and perspective, and all that stuff, right? And you start looking at this stuff, and again, it gets very slippery. You look at a dream. When you're asleep before the dream appears, there's essentially no space or whatever there is. Not particularly spatial. And you start dreaming, and all of a sudden you can be standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon. And there's all this space. Where did it come from? It's just virtual presentation space. And then, the dream stops, and the space is like, poof, it's just turned off, like a light switch or something. Here's all this space. Suppose you're lying in your room at night, you're lying cozy and warm in your bed, hopefully. And, you're sort of looking around the room and seeing a little dim light, and everything goes on. Where's the room go? Where's the space that was in the room go when you were asleep? It's just turned off. Peculiar. It's very peculiar. Oh, but the space is still there. I'm just not seeing it because I fell asleep. Prove it. I mean, that's logical. That makes sense. It's coherent in terms of the theory that there's an external world. How do you know there's an external world? Well, I'm seeing it. Okay, what do you mean? How do I know it's an external world? What is this? You know, what is this stuff? What is it? What is this? You know, I mean, but exactly, what is it? And you begin to look. If you look closely at that, you discover it's there because you're experiencing it. You close your eyes, and the room disappears. It completely disappears. Some room that you've never walked into and you never will walk into. How existent is it? How real is it? You know, well, if it's there, it's there. So I know it's there, even if I don't see it. But that's an argument. That's thought. The thought's there, but where's the room? You know, there is no room until there is a room, and there's a room when the room's experienced. I mean, this is, you know, this is actually very commonsensical, and we use this all the time. How do you know what's real? What's real is what's experienced. If I say, oh, there's, you know, a UFO full of pink elephants just landed in the middle of the room and they're bursting out with their blasters about to kill all of you, you know, and you look around and I don't see any UFO of pink elephants or blasters. It's just not real. It's just an idea. It's a thought. It's a fantasy. It's a delusion. It's a whatever. But there's no pink elephants. There's no UFO. There's no blasters. So it's not real. So we already use experiencing as a canon of reality. That's the yardstick by which something's real. If I say, you know, outside this room, there's the street of Santa Fe, and you walk outside the room and you see the street of Santa Fe, you say, okay, that's real. But you say that because you experience it, right? Suppose you drop dead and all of a sudden, massive heart attack. You know, 2 seconds later, you're just gone. Where's Santa Fe now? Where's New York? Where's the galaxy? Where's the material universe? And where is it right now when it's appearing? Is it anywhere different after you're dead than it is right now? When you go to sleep, Santa Fe disappears, right? So where does it come from when it appears? Is it really here, or is it just looks like that? So anyway, you know, all of this is just flirting with some possibilities of exploring the fact that the way experience actually works runs counter to the consensus reality idea and worldview of what our situation is, of what you are, of what's going on here. And the basic point of all this, the whole point of this weekend, the whole point of me bothering to talk to people about anything at all except what I'm interested in, which is basically sex and music, is because there's a punchline to this. The punchline is, if you look for yourself, you can discover this stuff. And if you discover this stuff, it is powerfully transformative in a way that I am claiming is really cool. And you can find that out for yourself by finding out for yourself. So that is pretty much the whole shooting match. So I feel like I've recapitulated yesterday and kind of laid out the whole curriculum in broad strokes. And here we are. Now what? So this has lots of implications and lots of details and lots of nuance. Because obviously, even though this is the way it is, it presents itself as infinitely complex and infinitely nuanced in terms of different modes of experiencing, different modes of confusion, different modes of delusion. I mean, one interesting aspect of all this is the simple idea would be, oh, I leave confusion and misinterpretation and go to clear seeing of what this really is. But it turns out clear seeing of what this really is doesn't stop the delusion. When you see that you're watching a TV show and you see the TV, it doesn't turn off the program. And the program's still running. And so what's up with that? Well, that's just interesting. You get used to it. It's like, okay, cool. So I'm not Peter Brown, but Peter Brown is still here appearing, doing his thing, being the neurotic person that he is, and so on and so forth. So that's interesting. So, I mean, it's very easy in spirituality to have a simple black and white idea of, oh, there's samsara and there's nirvana. And nirvana solves samsara and kind of shuts it off and eliminates that as an issue, and then you're sort of in bliss, sitting in a white robe on the top of a Himalayan peak, with people laying flowers at your feet or whatever. But it does, in actuality, it tends not to be quite like that, and that's interesting too, because as a spiritual investigator, one seems to keeps it sort of, it's easy, I should say, it's logical to expect to sort of leave one's delusion behind as one clearly sees what this is. But any experienced yogi will discover the strange phenomena that one's delusion is being dragged along with one the whole step of the way. It never actually goes away. So when one investigates what this is and discovers its transcendental nature, all of the seemings, all of the apparition, all of the misinterpretations don't just magically disappear. But they can be known for what they are. You can come to see that interpretations are interpretations. You can come to see that the intelligence endlessly spits off these interpretations. You can come to see that these interpretations are always hypotheses and never completely accurate. You can tend to see that the nature of awareness and attention and personality has a proclivity to get lost in these interpretations and play with them as if they were actual, like the way a teenager gets lost in a computer game. You can come to see these phenomena, but that doesn't necessarily make them cease. It's not a matter of a simplistic moving from delusion to clarity. Clarity turns out to be right smack in the middle of what we call delusion all along. But you just see it as what it is, rather than turning it off or mysteriously transforming it into plain vanilla and.
Would you say that which sees the basic properties of the has the same texture
Exactly. But having said that, when you say the same texture and qualities, don't have a simplistic idea that the same texture. You're looking for these textures and qualities, and you discover a very strange phenomena. It's not just a simple thing. So the answer to your question is yes, but it's a trick answer. The trick is that the texture and qualities of what's being experienced is not what you think it is. And neither is the texture and quality of what's experiencing it. Again, the closer you look, the more you discover, and the more you discover, the more you diverge from your starting point of what you thought it was.
So you're saying it's all the same thing?
It's all the same thing.
Even that which sees.
Yes, exactly so. It's a misunderstanding to suppose it's something that sees and something that's seen. That's an accident of logic.
What knows.
Right. Knowing what knows and what is known is also one and the same. We think of it, we split it off, and we suppose, well, there's something being known, so there must be something that's knowing it. But that's only in terms of logic, and logic doesn't apply. This is not a logical situation. Logic does not apply. Human logic does not apply, especially. Dualistic logic does not apply.
So when it said that this is infinite and it is everlasting and never dies and it never ceases.
Yes, that's true.
That could just as well be an interpretation.
Certainly. That can be an interpretation. It happens to be true, but it's true in the way that it's true. So you have to see what those words really mean to understand the way in which it's true.
Well, what would that be?
You can't be verbalized. You have to see directly.
So then it's a knowing of that.
Sure. There's nothing but knowing of that, so that's a given. Everything that appears is a knowing. I mean, you're seeing me, but you're seeing me is a knowing. It's a knowing of what you're thinking of as being seeing me.
Well, just say in reference to what you've been speaking about this morning,
What's that?
see through by seeing
Right.
solidity, and
Sure.
you can actually see, you can see what you're speaking
Sure.
about.
You always see what I'm speaking of. But what I'm speaking of, it does not is not something that it appears in one way. It appears in an infinity of ways, depending upon how it's seen. It doesn't resolve into actually being one way. And any of its apparitions are not truer or less true than any other of its apparitions. So I can see you as your Irma, a human being sitting in that chair, or I can see you as a transcendental, non-spatial, non-temporal field of miraculous light. And the one is not truer than the other. They're just both different ways of different perspectives of observation. So in other words, the question, which are you, is meaningless. Because this can be seen as an infinite range, and yet it never becomes anything other than what it is. So when you're being with this very stupidly and gullibly as a human being in a material body stuck in cause and effect, blah blah blah, that's not untrue. When you see it as an atemporal, aspatial, transcendental field of miraculous radiance, that's not untrue. And the one is no less untrue than the other. They're different perspectives on the same thing, because it has no final version. It's unresolvable. It's not like, oh, all of this materialist illusion resolves into being transcendental life. It's not like it moves from one thing to another and the other is truer than this. It's just, it can be seen as this, it can be seen as that, it can be seen as pretty much anything, but it doesn't, but what it is seen as has nothing to do with what it is, except that what it is that which can be seen in all these ways.
What is seen and what is experienced doesn't persist. It's constantly changing. Except that
From certain perspectives, you can say that. From certain other perspectives, you can say that persistence or non-persistence are not relevant qualities. Persistence is relevant if you're looking in terms of time, and if you're looking in terms of change. But again, when you're looking for time and you're looking for change, very closely you discover that there are very strange, slippery qualities that don't actually resolve into simply being that.
well, our experience, I think, is different.
Yes and no, not necessarily. It can be not, depending on your perspective. There is no way that it always seems to be consistently that way. It can seem to be consistently that way, but it can also seem to be drastically other than that, with equal truth, with equal actuality. It's very strange. It's very slippery.
It's very different than the experience of experiencing that.
Right.
Isn't something that comes into this. That
What?
seems to always.
Well, yes and no, but again, when you look at that, it comes and goes and all that. It's not like that's actually a relevant way to put it. Does it ever disappear? Sure, maybe. Is it always here? Sure, maybe. It can be seen that way. It can look like anything. It can literally look like anything. I don't mean like anything, but not that. I mean like anything. Can it look like absolutely zero? Sure. Can it look like reality never happened? Sure. Can it look like the normalcy of the horror of my human life in this pathetic, decadent, stupid society we're embedded in? Sure. It can look like all these different things, but it isn't any of them. It is that which can look like that. It's like, what's a dream look like? Well, it looks like what it looks like at the time it looks that way. And a dream can look like nothing at all when you're not dreaming. Before you start dreaming, what's the dream look like? Before you were born, what did the world look like? You've heard the Zen koan, what's your original face? Before you were born, what did the world look like? Don't know. But, not like this. And yet, what it was before you were born and what it looks like now is one and the same thing. It just looks really different, maybe. Maybe not. Right? Because again, you can't say what it looks like now. What does it look like right now? It depends how you look. And there's no limit to the range of how it can look. Right now, right here, right now. This is not, I'm not talking about abstraction or theoretically. I mean, experientially, actually, it can look like anything. Look at me and see nothing. You can do that. That's doable.
The experiencer or the experiencing.
Right?
And that's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking. But when you say you can know that,
Yes. You can know that, but not necessarily in the way that you think knowing that is going to be like when you do know that. In actual fact, you can discover that you're always knowing that. It's probably a more accurate way to put it. And the idea that there's some that to come to know that you better than that which you know now turns out not to be. But what you do know now turns out to be vastly more than you're holding it to be. Because what you know now is not something that can be held to be anything. Even as you're holding it to be things. Paradoxical. Very strange. Is it too cool for anyone in here? You guys comfy? Really cool. Freezing. Okay, good. Call a spade. I like that. I'll close the door for a little while. Or an hour anyway. Kind of a cool rainy day. Seems to be. Should we take a 5-minute break? Are you guys getting dizzy, or is this fun? We can plow on ahead, huh? Well, I think so. Can it look like dizzy? Well, obviously. Can it look like what the fuck? Well, obviously.
So is it like the experiencer looking at the experiencing and vice versa?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Vice versa.
When you say that this is all you,
Yeah.
and that it's like we're generating all of this.
Sure.
So we're generating it?
Well, not we, you.
Me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm generating all of this.
Yes.
And is it so that at some point, I'm trying to discover that I'm generating?
Mm-hmm. It's possible to discover that you're generating all this. I can tell you that. Whether or not that's a motive or a purpose or an intent, who knows? And the way I put it yesterday is it's kind of like taking advantage of the fine print. You know, it's possible to discover that you're behind all this and doing all this, but there's no need for you to, and you don't necessarily gain anything by doing so. But it has to be a loophole that it is possible, and so therefore, if you're interested and capable of availing yourself of that loophole, you're welcome to.
So if you're, and that's, I appreciate that. So if you're like in the TV and you're aware that you're in the TV,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're also aware of the little pixels,
Mm-hmm.
how do you make that leap from being aware of the pixels to being aware of what's generating it?
Because the pixels and what's generating it are one and the same. You can follow the pixels to the generating, because it's not like the pixels are over here and the generating is over here. It's not, let's use another analogy that might make it more clear. The dream. If you're dreaming, if you're looking for the dreamer, what's doing the dreaming, it's not like that what's doing the dreaming is over here somewhere and the dream's over here. What's doing the dreaming is right there in the dream. The dream is the dreaming, and the perceiver of the dream is the dreaming, and what's doing the dream is the dreaming. It's all. We have these. We talk about these as if there's a dream, and there's entity seeing the dream, and there's what's doing. We talk about these semantically as if they're different parts of a machine that somehow put together to make some elaborate mechanism. But that's just semantic construction. If you're looking at the actuality, you just find a single thing. And it is clearly being perceived, whatever that means. It is clearly appearing, whatever. So in some sense, it is being appeared, whatever that means, to the extent that's relevant. But you don't find parts, you don't find separate pieces that are sort of separate components that are responsible for doing separate things. You just find the seamless, maybe seamless actuality. The actuality is, here's the actuality. Where is what is seeing it? Here. Where is what is being seen? Here. Where is what is doing all this to the extent anything is being done? Here. You know, where is the substance of it? Here. You know, so here means this. So it all collapses. So all of these looking at it from different angles and in terms of different components or different functionalities is a logical construction. We look at the actuality and we assume, well, since this is a perception, there must be a perceiver. But that's a logical argument. Says who? Maybe it's just here. Why does it have to be a perceiver? Why does it have to be consciousness? Maybe there's no consciousness. We think there's consciousness because we have to invent. Why does it have to be seen by something? I mean, suppose it's just weirder than weird, and human logic doesn't apply, and it's being seen without a seer. Maybe it's appearing without anything appearing. Maybe there's nothing here that's appearing. Why does no? Because if something's appearing, then it has to be made of something. What? That's like some lawyer in a courtroom or some philosopher in a podium arguing. You know, says who? Who says human logic applies? Oh, humans do. It's logic that human logic applies. You know, this is not a logical event. This is not a logical actuality. Human logic is supposedly derived from this, and I think by and large has done a piss poor job of it.
Like last night, I was letting myself space out, like you said,
Mhm.
and I was really just looking at the TV screen, and from looking at it, well, it was very interesting because one, there was a TV screen, and then I had a glass window, and then there was the reflection of the TV screen.
Sure, yeah.
In there.
Yeah.
And then there were the rays of light that were coming off of the screen. And it was really like you were talking about patterning. To see those rays of light are just another interpretation of what you're seeing.
Yeah.
So then I guess where I get confused is where you're saying, I know that those rays of light are the same thing that appear on the screen. But then where is this I, this sense of I?
Where's the eye? Where's the rays of light? Where's the TV? Where's the screen? Where's the reflection in the window? Where is an apparition. It seems to be there, but you go look. What does there mean? You go looking for there, and there turns out to be a very slippery notion. So, where turns out not to be a relevant category. I mean, here you are. You're seeing this right now. Where are you? Where is what's seeing your experience right now? Here. What more can you say? Is here a location? Is here a place? Compared to what? Here is where everything is. Is there ever anything that's not here? You look out in the sky and you see the sun. Where do you see it? You see it here. Here, in your experience. Here is in your experience. Is there anywhere else? Is there anywhere else than in your experience? I mean, where would you look?
I was thinking about what you were saying yesterday about looking through the window, sort of the magic window.
Yeah.
I was starting to look that way, look at this that way, and then I thought, wow, this whole idea of perspective is really suspicious. You know, I was like, hey.
Very iffy.
I saw something suspicious.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And I keep seeing it all the time, like, hey, who put that there? Does that really mean everything? There's a depth to everything, or is that just the way it's presenting?
Yeah, yeah. It's like, the whole sense of spatiality is derived from two things. The fact that things seem to be smaller when they're what we call farther away, and the fact that things that are in front of something else seem to block that something. But you can be watching a computer screen, you can be watching a computer game, and something can get smaller and something else can seem to come in front of it, and there's no space there. So the space is an implication of the actual phenomena of shifting of apparent size and dimension and blocking of presentation and so on. But that's the actual phenomena. The space is just an innuendo. There's space between us because there's people in between the space, so there must be space.
Yeah, right. It's interesting, you see those industrial sort of designs that if you look real close, all of a sudden you see a pattern. All of a sudden some depth appears and you go, oh, it's too all bizarre.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Well, those are classic. You guys know what Leif's talking about. These they come in lots of books called Magic Eye or something. They look like these weird colored little snow or whatever on a page, and you look at it a certain way and relax your eyes, and all of a sudden it turns into a 3D image. You've all seen those kinds of things. They used to be popular a few decades ago in malls and stuff. But it's a classic example of there's different ways to see things. And you look at it one way, it looks like something. You look at it another way, it looks drastically very much like something else. And yet it's the same thing, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, in painting,
Paintings.
perspective was discovered.
True.
I mean, if you go to Rome and go and watch the medieval art or icons and everything, there is no.
No, actually, they changed the space. There didn't used to be space. Then somewhere in the Middle Ages, they invented space, and all of a sudden perspective came. Back in the Egyptian days, everything was just. Everything had only one side. They didn't have space back then. It's a different time entirely.
It's funny, like all of a sudden something that you've always taken for granted, like the depth of what you're seeing, like depth of field.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you can go, wow, that is suspicious. Just
Yeah,
that.
it's a supposition. Sure.
Just that how it could appear that way. That's It's really odd.
It is. It's all very odd. And if you look at anything in terms of perception, you will discover the same oddness. The intelligence, the perceiving intelligence, seems to be so astoundingly powerful that it can effortlessly and instantaneously generate these virtual realities of space and time and all these complexities out of sort of scanty and sketchy information. What's actually perceived, like you're not seeing space, you're seeing perspective.
Yeah, right.
And yet the intelligence effortlessly looks at perspective and derives space from it.
Yeah.
Right. And there's so many other aspects of perception that are the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, suppose this isn't three-dimensional. I'm just looking at a two-dimensional thing, like those strange books,
Sure.
Magic Eye books.
Sure.
And all of a sudden it looked like this room with those tacos over there. And maybe it's just two-dimensional and I'm making it.
Sure. Suppose it's one-dimensional. Maybe your visual field is actually a point.
Yeah.
And somehow it looks like this.
Yeah.
Look at it closely. You can see it that way.
Like the and so I immediately flash on like what I do all day at work is try to get people to change their perspective. Because like somebody comes into their life and they make it
It's stock and
bigger
trade.
than ever,
Sure.
and it's like they can't live without them or they hate
Yeah.
them, and it's like
They're locked into an imaginary perspective that they think is real.
that they think is real, and then if I work with people long enough, it's like, boy, I can't believe I was so in love with blah blah, and I thought I was going to die. I thought that relationship didn't last forever, and so it'd be interesting to see how I could, have them look at other things that are more neutral.
It's
like
exactly
that.
the same. I mean, this is what we're dealing with here. I mean, as absurdly, the heavy-handedness with which a neurotic person can actualize their perspective is just how heavy-handedly we all actualize our actuality as a human being living in space and time, inhabiting this body. I mean, it's equally sketchy in actual fact.
Well, like even like as I'm looking at you now, there's that, I don't know if that's Shiva or whatever behind Kali. And because of the way it's painted, you look two-dimensional.
Sure.
Right? Because of what the background is behind it. I don't know if that works.
Sure.
I don't know how my eye does that.
How can you know?
I think our science is probably mostly because all of our previous theories of science were along with the spiritual or current science.
Sure. And current science is getting to the point where it basically, the theories that it's proposing don't look very much like theories because they're basically looking more and more like anything goes.
Yeah.
I mean, science has already gotten there's no matter, they've already gotten there's no space, they've already gotten there's no time.
Yeah.
So science is actually looking pretty damn slippery itself. So the theories they're proposing aren't like are less like theories and more like total non-theory.
Well, it's going in reverse.
Not surprisingly, because
Shamans used to
yeah.
be the scientists.
Sure.
And it was esoteric became science, and now science
Sure.
becomes esoteric.
And it's not surprising that science gets there because if you look, science investigates experience in actual fact, because what else is there to look at? Science looks at matter, but they're really looking at as experience, because matter is an aspect of what shows up as experience. So it's no wonder that science gets to the same place that spirituality does, true spirituality does, because they're looking at the same thing, and sooner or later, unless they've really got their heads up their butts, they're going to have to begin to notice some aspects of what is actually there in the way that it is there. And lo and behold, not surprisingly, they're doing that.
This is not formed, which is fine. The perception is coming from the entity out, or is it coming from the outside in?
Is that even relevant? Is that two ways, or can you see the same thing as either way? I mean, how can you know? All you can say is there's apparition.
Yeah.
Is it really directional?
It's just shifting. Yeah, I'm shifting the direction.
Yeah.
Rather than saying it's coming out.
Yeah.
Is it coming in?
Yeah. Or is it just none of the above? Is it just is, and there's no out, no in, just like poof, just like magic, just like you take your magic while you go poof, and all of a sudden there's, and who knows, right? We're used to thinking that, oh, of course it's like such and such. But in actuality, if you look at any of these of courses, it gets a little shaky because there's alternatives. You can see it other ways just as viable.
I just sort of thought something. So I was like looking at the Buddha and I thought up in the corner there, and I thought, okay, I could ask her, is there a brown Buddha up there? And she'd say, probably actually. But that's all in my experience.
Of course.
I'm getting agreement.
Yes.
So my experience is I'm getting agreement from somebody.
Right. Sure.
So they can, everything can do something.
Yeah, the agreement is in your experience. Yeah, you could be dreaming, and you could dream you're seeing a mountain, and you could ask the person next to you in your dream, do you see that mountain? And they could say yes.
Well, that would be creepy.
Would it?
They'd have to be in my dream.
Well, if they're appearing in your dream, I mean, if you're in a dream and you're talking to someone in the dream,
Oh, okay.
and you say, God, that's a beautiful mountain, and they say, yeah. I mean, that the mountain's there, they verify it.
Right.
But who's verifying that they're there?
Right. Who's like verifying she's there?
Exactly. All that verifies it is the fact that it appears as your experience.
But that's almost like a little scary. So
Yeah, check it out. Check it out. Okay, here's an important point. It's not scary because it really is scary. It's scary because it's just very different than what you're used to. But it might actually not be scary. It'd be actually kind of even less scary than what you're used to once you get used to it. We feel comfortable with what we're used to, and we feel threatened by anything that's different, even if what's different is actually better than what we're used to. So don't worry too much about the scary. The scary is fun. That means you're playing with something that's genuinely different. If it's not scary, then you're just playing. You're staying on safe ground. You're staying on home ground and stuff you already know. Where's the fun in that? So it's interesting to push your own envelope, like, whoa, wait a minute, hold the phone. When you get that kind of a sensation, that's good, because that means you're pushing your own envelope.
Maybe there's nobody to be scared.
Maybe. Can I hear that? Maybe scaredness just appears
Yeah,
to no one,
yeah.
from nothing.
Yeah.
Along the same lines there's this science and non-duality conference, and you look at it and it's like, well, science says that non-duality, they've been saying it now in modern science, and then that increases the validity of stuff that people have discovered without science discovering it. It's kind of like, I don't know how science became God, and if science agrees, then it's true. And of course, I work in a world where science is double-blind placebo study, and that it works. Versus like,
Sure.
I tried it, it worked. A lot of people, and it's kind of like, but you have to play that game of like, well, science validates this, so it's real rather
Sure.
than I have that experience.
Yeah. Well, science is a game structure that pretends to have checks and balances because you have peer review. You can't just say something.
Right.
You can't just like I had this great idea and I'm pretending I discovered it. I'm going to publish an article because someone else is going to try and replicate it, and they're going to say, "Hey, bullshit! I tried that; it didn't work at all."
Right.
You know, I let go of my cup and it floated upwards and hit the roof. It's like that doesn't happen when I do it. What what are you on?
Right.
But it begs. But again, as you pointed out, it begs the question. That science is really just an elaborate game structure, which has come to be validated in the popular imagination. But it's an absurdity because scientists can be wrong and deceptive and ignorant as much as random wackos on the street corner. I have seen God, and God drives a '57 Chevy and is painted pink. It's like, okay, cool. I mean, anyone can say anything, right? Look at spiritual teachers. Anyone can sit up in the front of this room and just spout any kind of bullshit. Look at me, and gullible people will go like, "Oh wow, that's really interesting." I mean, look at the spiritual forums out there. Look at all the people sitting up in the front of rooms full of avid people listening to all kinds of divergent crap. One person saying another thing, another person saying another thing. It's like, what? So there's no peer review for spiritual teachers. It's no wonder it's discredited. But just because someone's being a spiritual teacher doesn't mean they're full of shit. And just because someone's a scientist doesn't mean they're not full of shit. So what's really relevant is the full of shitness, not the game structure of peer review and so on and so forth. And there's no gauge of that. You have to. It's caveat emptor. You have to look for yourself and see what holds what holds water.
But it's like what you were saying. That's all that you can do. Right?
Exactly. That's the point. Ultimately, science is a subset of experiencing, not the other way around.
Right.
Scientists are actually investigating what happens in experience. So scientists are actually investigating experience just like everyone's investigating experience. So science does not actually have a privileged viewpoint. It claims to because of all of its elaborate game structures and peer review. But all of that, if you look at it very closely, is kind of a zero-sum game. It cancels itself out because, but even with all that structure, can you have inaccuracy? Obviously. Does that guarantee accuracy? Obviously not. Does anything guarantee accuracy? Obviously not. It's accurate if it's accurate. Anyone can say anything, and it's true. It's true, or it's more true or less true, depending on if it's more true or less true. Not who they are and what their game structure is and what their social status is. Just because someone calls himself a spiritual teacher doesn't make them true. And just because someone calls himself a scientist doesn't make them true. It's just different game structures. It's different social paradigms, and people are not social paradigms. All social paradigms are game structures. I'm wearing a certain kind of clothes and I speak my English in a certain kind of a way, so that gives me a certain kind of an implicit social status. It's like, what? You can have someone that's wearing real crappy clothes and speaks terrible English. It's just a a wonderful genius and a warm person. You could have someone very articulate and very upper class and very well turned out with a lot of money, and they're a total asshole, obviously. So I mean, all of these game structures of social, any kind of social status. Or I'm a scientist. I have 2 doctorates, and I've been. It's like, so what? Are you an asshole or not? I don't give a shit how long you were in school. I want to know if you're an asshole.
And then I have people come in and they say, you know, what should I do? How should I do this? And I say, oh, you need to figure that out. Well, you're the doctor. It's like, so not you. You know?
You want me to live your life for you? I will. But be careful what you wish for.
Like, no,
I'll tell you what to do if you really want to know, but you might not take me. Be careful what you ask for.
It's funny that statement, assholeness versus non-assholeness. It assumes a reference point.
Of course.
And like, I don't know, there's preference, but who said it?
Absolutely.
Who really says the guy that's like, most people here would agree is totally good?
Well, again, it's not a matter of objective condition. It's a matter of subjective utility. So if someone's perspective or presence is of some use to you in some sense, and according to your own assessment, then that makes them relatively a non-asshole, or whatever.
But even my own assessment, at some point, I can't even find that for myself.
Of course. But that's what you got. Your art is being you. Your art is living your life, whatever that is. And part of that art is learning what your art is. And you learn it in real time by doing it. And you don't ever actually learn it. You just kind of fumble through it or whatever. I mean, who knows what? This is just a way of spinning it. And so all of that is part and parcel of your art, which is part and parcel of learning who to trust and who not to trust, and learning, well, I trusted that person and I shouldn't have, or the fact that I trusted him and I shouldn't have, it was good that I trusted him because I learned that I shouldn't have. I mean, it's just an infinite, it's this nested, Russian dolls. There's no final way things are. But on the other hand, you're wise and artful to try to find yourself in situations that seem useful to you in terms of your best, most artful aspect of cutting edge of engagement with your process, whatever that is, and however that seems to be for you, right? It's not a matter of objective. Oh, these things are this way, and they actually are. Says who? Prove it, right?
The takeaway from all this about the total indeterminacy of everything, the takeaway is basically that we can't really know what anything is.
Right.
It's something, but we can't really know it because it's too indeterminate.
Yeah.
And anytime we're like sticking on something the way we see it, like worshiping something or something,
Yeah.
that is that's just one way of viewing what this is.
Yeah.
But no need to get stuck in any of that because we don't actually even know what this is.
Sure. But knowing what this is and not knowing what this is are not necessarily relevant, because here you are. It's like this ongoing dance, ongoing art form, and it's not a matter of, well, do I know what I'm doing? No, I don't know. Kind of not.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I can pretend to know what I'm doing in certain ways, but I'm doing it anyway to the extent I'm doing it. I mean, I'm here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Here I am doing what I'm doing. I don't know what that is, but I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So it's it still is a dance. It still is a participatory art form in some sense, even if you're totally clueless. You aren't really, because you're being you, and what you are at core is essentially omnipotent. So you have resources to draw on, even if they're irrational.
Right. Because the omnipotence comes in from the standpoint of since everything is like totally indeterminate and is being done by whatever force is
Yeah.
you would have to be that force basically.
Well, you have to be, because there's nothing else.
That's the only game in town.
Yeah.
It's the only force that's happening.
So it's doing what it's doing, and it's doing all this, and whether or not it as a purpose or a point or a pattern or a goal or not, it still has some pretty serious chops, and it's the only game in town. So, and
Yeah,
here you are essentially doing that,
right,
and so that's what this is. I mean, here you are.
right,
You know, and so the question of do I know what I'm doing? I don't know.
right.
Maybe yes, maybe no. You can,
Right, you never actually know what you're doing.
Yeah.
If that determined, you couldn't never know what
and yet that doesn't negate or cancel out any resources you have, any intelligence you have, any kind of chops you have, or talents you have to draw on, for better or for worse,
you're doing.
that you know seemingly bring into play in your
Yeah,
in
yeah,
this dance and this apparent interaction.
sure. Like your intuitions about your behavior.
Yeah, sure, intuition or just kind of an irrational going for it or whatever, right? You know, so it doesn't. It's not a matter of simply negating oneself to powerlessness or something. Even if you can't know what you are,
Yeah,
you're not nothing in any simple sense. There's obviously some pretty serious chops and some pretty serious potency behind what's doing all this.
sure.
So
And what's doing your preferences and
yeah, it's doing you. I mean, it's doing your world. It's doing your reality. Something's going on apparently, and it's pretty impressive in some sense of wow, something. Whatever's doing this has really got some serious, firepower,
Right.
and so one can assume that maybe that accounts for something, even if you're apparently clueless on the front lines here.
Yeah. But sort of the indeterminacy of everything makes consensus reality. It kind of destroys it. Consensus. It sort of negates consensus reality slightly. Right?
And that's the point. That's really the point. Consensus reality turns out to be a straitjacket. It turns out to be a big ball and chain
Yeah.
that people tie on themselves voluntarily. And the whole point of all this is you don't have to.
Sure. Yeah.
So you can cut that chain, and then if you want to tie yourself to some other chain, you're welcome to, but you don't even have to do that. And so it's just like you don't need to be stuck with what you've been given. There's actually options. You actually have some wiggle room.
Yeah.
And this is all about investigating that and finding out what's up with that,
Right.
and taking advantage of it if you feel so inclined to.
Well, I feel like I've been tricked a little bit, but I really cannot say what it is. But if I can just go back to what you were talking about in a dream, and you said you see that mountain, you felt
Right.
you got confirmation that.
Sure.
So I've been doing looking into my thoughts a lot in systematic period of time. And I clearly see that all the story that I had in the past actually is within me, because I created this stick figure. Somebody said this and something happened and blah blah blah. And then by seeing that, a lot of entanglement or emotion just subside, disappeared.
Mhm.
But it doesn't stop me from still getting caught up sometimes. I think you said that and I did that. No, you're not right, and
Right.
I'm hurt and I'm angry and so on and so
Right.
forth, right? But I can see, it is still that gameplay within me.
Sure.
But what I couldn't see clearly is when I deal with people, I'm talking with people. Of course, I can feel the energy. Yes, most of the time I just see the energy flowing. The urge of saying something, and something comes back, and the reaction. It's all kind of energy flowing.
Yeah.
But I still don't see that as coming in me. I still feel like
Right.
it's subject and object. That kind of situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
But even the subject and object, seeing it like that is in your experience. So it's in you as your experience, even if it's not in you as your personality or your mind over here. I mean, you are the entire bubble of your experience, right?
Right, but in other words, I still feel that me and others.
I understand, sure. Well, that's possible. This can be seen that way, and since it can be seen that way, that's a viable way of seeing it. But it's not an exclusive way of seeing it. It doesn't have to be seen that way.
Yeah.
See, that's one of the very interesting and perplexing aspects of what this is. Even if it is a certain way, it can simultaneously be other ways at the same time and in the same place. So it's not like it's not either this or that. It can be this and that. You know, it can be self and other and neurotic personality, and at the same time this sort of weird energy presence, and they can coexist as sort of different modes or different subsystems within. I mean, apparently whatever, right?
Yeah, it's kind of
So like
interesting.
like you say, like the energy dance. You know, like two people can be talking, and you can be you, and I can be me, and you're thinking what you're thinking, I'm thinking what I'm thinking, and we have our emotions and all that. But at the same time, there's just this amazing energy flow that's somehow, it doesn't cancel that out. It's just sort of something else that's also going on. Right? It's like an alternative. It's like having a TV in the room, and there's also music playing in the room, and there's also a fire in the room, and there's also someone doing a performance in the room. It's like many different aspects, different media, different sort of logics being presented simultaneously that don't necessarily have anything to do with each other, but they're all here in your experience.
Well, somehow I feel like that I'm supposed to be weighted more in energy side instead of
Well,
like a personality, my personal view or other people's
Sure.
personal or the story
Sure.
get on for this. It feels more enjoyable to feel the energy side.
Sure.
You know, just so vivid and
Sure.
so enjoyable and delightful, whatever, or anger, whatever.
Well, this is a very interesting conundrum you're pointing out, actually. And you're pointing out the different phases of spiritual work. At certain phases of spiritual work, you're trying to do one thing, and then at certain other phases, you end up doing exactly the opposite. So, at the beginning, for beginners, you know, beginners typically have a long history of being stuck in their personality and stuck in their worldview, and they think that's how it is. And so, the big work for them is to see more than that, to learn energy, or to learn, you know, dimensions, or to learn whatever, to see, wow, there's something more going on. And so at that phase, the interesting thing is to get out of yourself and out of your normal personality, out of your perspective into more bigness. But after a while, once you've done that, and the personality hasn't gone away, then the challenge kind of reverses itself. And you say, well, there's all this other stuff here, but what about this personality? So all of a sudden, instead of the personality being a prison you're trying to break out of, a personality is a present phenomenon that you're investigating. See what I mean? So the personality is no longer a problem; it becomes a curiosity. It becomes now you've investigated subtle energy. Now you, from the perspective of subtle energy, you can investigate personality, and maybe you discover another kind of subtle energy. See, because what things seem to be can look very, very different at different phases of your process. So what seems to be a big problem in one phase of the problem can actually be something that is really interesting in another phase. So, you know, I mean, if you look at the arc of unfoldment of a yogi, of a spiritual investigator, if someone embarked on this path of actual unfoldment, the first arc is kind of the uphill arc, you could say. Think of a cannonball shooting up in the air and then eventually it levels off and then it falls. So the shooting up in the air part, that climbing the hill, is trying to get out of your normalcy. And you're trying to get out of your normalcy and discover there's more. Wait a minute, I'm not stuck in this normalcy. I'm not stuck in this personality. There's more. This wild, crazy stuff here. And so you look and you discover and you find, yeah, there is more. Wow, this is incredible. Look at this. You know, there's all this subtle energy and non-dimensionality and non-physicality and all of that. And then you're at the top of your arc. But then things turn around and you go exactly the opposite. Instead of going outwards, you start going back inwards. Where it's, well, okay, so I've discovered there's all this weird stuff, but there's still my life, there's still my personality, there's still my karma and my neuroses and all that. What's up with that? And so from that perspective of what you discovered, you move back down, so to speak, and what you were working to get out of, now you're going back into from a fresh perspective and investigating it. And it's like an integration. So the first phase is like an analysis. You're separating things into their elements and seeing what you can find. And the second phase, you're taking everything you found and amalgamating it into a whole that it actually is. So it's a phase of including rather than a phase of excluding. So in the beginning, you're saying, not this, not this, not my personality, not my life, not my normalcy. And you're seeing what else there is. And then you do exactly the opposite. So, and this can be perplexing because when you're used to trying to get away from your personality, and lo and behold, it follows along with you everywhere you go. It doesn't go away conveniently. So then the question becomes, well, okay, in the light of this amazingness, what's up with that? What's up with this personality? What's up with this body? What's up with this karma? But it's from an entirely fresh perspective. It's like the other side of the coin. And so you may be experiencing something along those lines a little bit. Because I know, I mean, for many years you've been really working, going to the subtle energy and going to see beyond the normal perspective, and you've had a lot of success with that.
It's very interesting to look into this personality.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very. Sometimes feel bothersome, but sometimes you just feel these vibes and you don't know where it's come from. So
Yeah,
subtle.
exactly.
And sometimes it's so full blown that
Yeah.
you can't control it. It's just that.
Yeah.
And yeah, but it's very interesting.
Yes, the personality is very strange. You know, when we're coming from a position of ignorance, when we're beginners, the typical, psychological mindset is some degree of self-loathing. We hate ourselves. We want to get out of ourselves. You know, God, I'm stuck in the personality of my limitations. I want to be more than that. I want to be free. I want to be outside. And that's cool. So you push that envelope and you try and discover, is there an outside? And if so, what's there? But again, you find whatever's outside, you find what's there to an extent, but your personality hasn't magically disappeared. So the question is, well, in the light of this, what is that? And so you turn your attention. You're spending all your attention trying to get out of the house, and you've gotten out of the house, but the house is still there. So then you, from out of the house, you go back and look into the house and say, well, what's up with this? What is this? And you get a whole new sense of it because you discover what you found when you get out of the personality is what the personality actually is. So you discover the personality and psychology, your psychic nature, your psychology and all that is actually an amazing, miraculous, subtle energy system. So rather than being this horrible, limiting, pathetic, ugly thing that we have hated all our lives, we discover it is itself an amazing transcendental energy phenomenon that is, in fact, doesn't need to be hated, doesn't need to be loathed, doesn't need to be escaped from, because it itself is endless weirdness.
So I was having like a thought, and so all of a sudden my consciousness appeared.
That's what she's here for.
She's
Convenient.
She did something that she can't.
Right.
I slap her.
Right.
I can get agreement from half the room that she deserved a slap, and the other half of the room would probably say, not cool.
Sure.
Okay.
Including me.
Yeah.
Right. So that's appearing in my consciousness in the world. Anger.
Yeah.
Slapping.
Yeah, all that.
All this energy, crappy crap.
Right.
And then so I was like following the whole thing through in my mind. Scary place to be. But and I thought at some point there should just be like disinterest. Like I wouldn't, like the thought would come, anger, bitch, slap, but I wouldn't follow through. So there's like a responsibility there in this sort of consciousness thing. And then I went to this idea that a group at home with Jack and such, we go to Panera Bread, and there's this woman who kind of sometimes comes in and she's what we would probably all judge to be she sort of walks around and I thought to myself, even at that moment and just now, like with this disinterest, like there's this, there's Lisa with her interest, with her anger, there's Lisa with decadence, there's Lisa, with all her personality qualities of good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if I have total disinterest in all that, like maybe it'll turn out to be, not in a bad way, except from maybe somebody else's perspective, sort of like
disinterested in everything, so I would look sort of schizophrenic in a way, do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
Yep.
you're just sort of like, or like, you know, somebody who follows the Grateful Dead around or something,
Sure.
you know?
It can happen. I hear even that the degree of psychosis can occur. Yeah.
You understand why they turn in circles, but
Yeah.
even if it's just like, that was the best way I could describe, because I'm just trying to get this, and
Sure.
the best way to describe it is just like a disinterest in myself.
Sure.
And sort of like what other people are up to, you know?
You could also call it uninvested. You see it all happening, but you're not invested in the outcome, you're not invested in the personality, because you see what's really there.
Because I am noticing that, like, I can still get into a crazy squirrel mind, get up, you know,
Sure.
and tell a story and get angry and, you know.
Yeah.
But I get out of it quicker.
Sure.
And
Exactly.
I could say it doesn't have the intensity, but I really would be lying about that.
Yeah, it's not important. The thing is to notice that even when that's going on, your personality is going on and your reactions are going on, your emotions are going on, but that's not the only thing going on. Even when that's happening, there's more going on. And so there's a bigger context, right? There's a bigger perspective. And so that it's not like you need to be disinterested in your personality, but your personality, instead of being this big important thing that's up front and center and is everything, just becomes, it's a little bit smaller. It's just, hey, that's happening. You know, I feel pissed off about this, or I'm judging this, or I'm this or that or the other. But you're also noticing, gosh, but there's all these other perspectives that are here on the table too, and that's interesting too. And it's simultaneous. It's like multitasking. It's like you have several windows open on your computer at the same time, and one of them is your personality and your emotions and your reactions, and the other is, you know, the others are just other different things that don't necessarily have much to do with that, and they're there too. And
So, I'll never care, I'm angry at her for something, but then I see she's knitting and it
Yeah.
looks kind of pretty and I'm interested in that. So
Sure, that's
my
going on
mind goes
too.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then I'm flashing over to the red color again.
Yeah, and then there's all this weird shit we're talking about, and so all these different things are happening all at once, and they don't step on each other's toes. They don't even have much to do with each other. It's just like, it's like all these different energy frameworks that are happening concurrently, and from each perspective, they're sort of what they are. They have some importance, but it's given that they're all sort of happening at once. It's like having a bunch of TVs on in the room at the same time. They're tuned to different channels. It's like, you know, what does it mean? I don't know. It's just a lot of weird, weird shit going on.
Is there anything outside of that weird shit? Like there's this window open, that window open.
Look and
this
see.
window open,
Look and
they're
see.
changing.
See what you can find. I mean, this is your adventure. This is your exploration. What do you think? Check it out. Explore. Which you're doing. I laud you for that. Play with it. Why don't we break for lunch? We've had a nice long run here, and I'm sure you're going to turn. So your brain's going to start turning into jello if it hasn't already. We go on much, drone on much longer. So it's about blah blah blah. It's about what? 5:12. Why don't we knock off till 1:20ish? So a good hour and a half. You know, relax, go get some lunch, have a walk, whatever you like, and we'll meet back here around 1:20 and see what happens. Continue with this weirdness, if any.
Oh, yeah. Oh, cute. That would be very nice.